smarty. He says, I will listen to the whole message without making any faces. Give me a smarty. So that's for Scott. Scott's an adult back there. So, kids, I might just try something this morning for the first time. If you have a sheet, there's a little sheet in front of everybody. It's called a Little Baptist Scribble Sheet. I think that's what it's called. Adults, you can use that if you want, but it's mainly for the kids. And if the kids want to come up here and sit between like Lori and Brian, these are the church bouncers, okay, right here. They'll get them good if they mess around. And if not, they can just sit with you. And kids, I'll be watching. It's funny when we're back here with the kids during this service. It's amazing the response kids have to candy. And it's a principle of reward. Good behavior, the reward for good behavior. Us adults, we respond differently to rewards. We don't really need it. We wouldn't say it, but we really like rewards. Good job, Tommy. Tommy, good job. Let's get the whole bag, okay, Tommy? So, all right, we got another drop one right here, all right? Just screaming at the kids in the front row the whole time. So you guys are brave ones. I appreciate you guys coming out and getting out in the snow and driving to church today. God bless you for that. I got up and looked at the weather today, and I told Gina I'm not going to church today. She's like, aren't you doing the message? I guess we're going. We're here. I thought about calling Mark, but he just told me to go pound sand, right? And come up with your own message, brother. But glad to see you today. So we're going to be looking at an adult and a child today. So everybody's going to be included. We'll look at an adult. His name is Philip, and then we're going to look at a no-namer child, okay? Doesn't give his name, but God used him in an incredible way. So we'll look at an adult and a child today. So we'll cover everybody here this morning. Make sense? So take your Bibles if you would, and let's go to John in chapter 6. John 6. Just put a plug out here real quick. If you are here and you have a desire to work with kids during this time, I'd love to talk to you. There's some of us that are doing it once a month, sometimes twice a month, and there's got to be someone out here that wants to be picked on. Okay, pick me, I want to do it. But you're just afraid to come forward and get involved. If you're out there, I'd love to talk to you. I have learned more about human behavior working with kids than working with adults. Kids are cool. Kids are the best. And it's mainly the response that you get from kids as opposed to an adult. See, when kids have no shame. If you hold up this candy and say something like, who built the ark? All the kids' hands will go up. All of them. They don't know the answer, but their hands go up. And so some of them do. But you'll pick on the kids and say, hey, who built the ark? And they'll be like, I don't know. They don't know the answer, but they want to be picked, right? Us adults are different. We have to know the answer to it to raise our hand. Because it saves us an embarrassment or embarrassing. We don't want to be embarrassed. Kids don't care. Because there's always a chance to get that piece of gum. Right? If we're confused, I remember teaching back there, and it was, what's the oldest Ellie? I'll just point her because they used to sit over here. Ellie, she was like 10 years old, and I was teaching, and out of the blue, she says, she does this. I'm so confused. Just like that. And what kid says that? Have you ever been confused in church? You thought about doing that, but you're just too ashamed? Kids are so honest, really honest. I've had kids say, this is so boring. And then you throw a songbook at them, right? But if we're confused in church and we have questions, we're like, I don't get it. You don't go out the door and say, Gary, that's a great message. You didn't get anything out of it, right? Oh, we lie. Kids don't lie. Just amazing comparison between adults and kids. So we'll look at that in John chapter 6. John chapter 6. Let me get there real quick. And please look on with me, if you have a Bible with you. Please look on with me. And I just want to challenge you to read with me, okay? Stay with us. I'm going to read the first 12 verses, okay? First 12 verses. And I'm going to comment as we go. Normally I'll read a passage and then comment, okay? For sake of time, we'll just comment as we go, okay? Chapter 6 starts out with 3 words that really caught my eye. And they're the words, after these things. You see that? After these things. So you have to go back to chapter 5 and figure out what these things were. Well, after what things? And if you read chapter 5, actually chapter 5 is interesting because the first 2 verses, the first 2 words start out with this. After this. So you have to go to chapter 4, and so it kind of compounds. These stories are stories that just kind of keep compounding. And we know that Jesus was in his earthly ministry, 3.5 years of his earthly ministry before he was crucified. So Jesus is teaching his disciples. And Jesus is investing a whole lot into these men. Okay, remember there's 12 men, and Jesus is just investing into these men's lives. Like crazy. And there's only a short amount of time, so Jesus is teaching them. It seems like every moment was a teachable moment with Christ, okay? And we'll get that in just a second. But after these things, Jesus is doing some incredible things. So in chapter 5, he starts out with this great miracle, okay? Jesus is doing some great miracles. And it says in verse number 3, it talks about this blind or this poor man, this lame man from Bethsaida. It says in verse number 3, and these lay a great multitude of impotent folk. Some were blind, some were halt, withered, some were maimed, and they were waiting for this movement of water. In verse number 4 it says, and an angel went down in a certain season. So this angel would come down in a certain season into this pool, and he would trouble the water. And the first person that would go into this pool would be healed. That's just the way it worked. And so if somebody butted in front of you, they would be healed. So this poor guy that was lame, he could not walk, and so people butted in front of him for 38 years. Can you imagine 38 years trying to get to this pool and be healed? But somebody beat you to it, and there's only one person who got to the pool and be healed. If you got in there second, it didn't work. Isn't that crazy? In verse number 5 it says, and a certain man was there which had infirmity 38 years. So he was 38 years. So Jesus Christ at this time was how old? Probably 33 years old. So this man has been waiting at that pool longer than Jesus has been alive. That's crazy thought, isn't it? This man's been waiting 3 or 4 years before Jesus was alive. And then verse number 6 says this, and Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, and saith unto him, wilt thou be made whole? And this impotent man answers, says, sir, I have no man to carry me. Okay? And Jesus really, in a few short words, says, that's no big deal, just rise up and walk. Remember? He didn't have to get in the pool. Jesus said, rise up and walk, and he took off. And then the religious crowd of the Pharisees found out that Jesus healed on the Sabbath day. They were mad at Jesus for healing on the Sabbath day, okay? You know that story, there's more lessons in there. And so after this miracle, Jesus starts teaching some really deep stuff. And then we come to chapter 6, and something happens, okay? So, all by way of introduction, just stay with me, stay with me? I'm trying to build up to something. Jesus is teaching, and after teaching, there's always a what? A test. Teaching, test. How many of you are good test takers? Good test takers, okay? How many of you get nervous before a test? And you just hate tests. You start sweating. They just don't go well. I wasn't a good test taker. Me, teach me, but then come Friday, I had to ditch school. That really helped me. Just don't go to class, right? And I was a test. I was correct. He's good. Philip was one of these bad test takers. We're going to look at him. Philip. Look at verse number 1. Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, verse number 1. Look at verse number 2. And a great multitude followed him because they saw his miracles, which he did on them that were diseased, okay? This great multitude is following Jesus, okay? It says, not because they knew who Jesus was, not because they saw his miracles, but the underlying motive was because Jesus was filling their bellies, okay? I'll prove it in just a second. And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his, what's the next word? Disciples. Singular or plural? Plural. So there's either 12 disciples or there's more than 12 disciples. It doesn't really matter. A disciple is just a follower of Christ. So there's a lot of people just following Jesus, okay? Plural. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, verse number 4, was nigh. And when Jesus then lifted up his eyes and saw a certain company come unto him, he said unto who? Philip. One man. One man. When shall we buy bread that these may eat? Now I want you to stop right there for a second. Who's Jesus talking to? So how many disciples are with Christ? We don't really know. There was a lot of disciples around Christ. He sat with them. He's teaching them. Here's a multitude following Jesus Christ, okay? And Jesus, there's a predicament here, and they're following him, and there's 5,000 men plus women and children, so there's probably 50 to 20,000 people. And Jesus turns to Philip and says, verse number 5, whence shall we buy bread that these may eat? So he's testing Philip. Look at verse number 6. If you're not careful, if you read your Bible like I do, skip over a bunch. But I don't want you to miss verse number 6. You got to read this slow to get it. It says, and this he said to prove him. Who's him? Philip. For he himself knew what he would do. That's pretty crazy. That caught my eye. So that's the message today. Does Philip know what's going to happen? Has no idea. Does Jesus, according to that verse, know what's going to happen? He knows. He knows exactly what's going to happen. But this is for Philip. This is not for Jesus. This is a test. And Philip answered him, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take and eat. And so 200 penny worth was pretty much what a man, the average man would make in a year's time. 200 penny worth. Got it? And Philip is saying, even if we had the amount of money I make or these people make in a year, we would not have enough to buy enough bread that these may eat just a little bit of bread. If we divided it up evenly, everybody would just get a pinch of bread. That was his response. Now look at verse 7, or 8. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, there is a lad here which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? What are they among so many? So, let me get my notes here. So I'm trying to get off the road, okay? So, this is the message. Let me just say this a couple times. Let me just say this if you're writing notes. You know, this is the only miracle recorded in all the 4 Gospels. I'm going to think about something for a second. This is the only miracle recorded in all 4 Gospels. So how many miracles did Jesus do? Recorded, 37 to 40. Okay, if you want to add a few, it's fine, but the Bible also says in John, the last verse of John, that if everything that Jesus did was recorded. All the books, there would be enough books in the world, okay? It would just be on and on and on. So he didn't record everything, but he did record these miracles. And this is the only miracle recorded in all 4 Gospels, okay? Now, I want you to think about that. Remember Jesus turned the water into wine? That was only found in John chapter 2. Jesus walks on the water. That's a pretty great miracle, right? That's found in Matthew, Mark, and John, only 3 times. Luke didn't write about it, for some reason. Jesus heals the blind man. That only shows up 1 time, Mark chapter 8. Jesus calms the storm. Matthew, Mark, and Luke write about it, but John, for some reason, skipped it. But nobody skipped the feeding of the 5,000. Pretty crazy. Why not? Is it really that important? I mean, what's the big deal? So I started diving into it a little deeper, trying to figure out why this miracle is recorded in every gospel. It must be important. So there's some lessons I want to show you quickly. You guys are being good. Thank you for being good on the front row. You guys are awesome. Okay? You're taking notes. If you guys give me a little bit of that Baptist scribble sheet or whatever, give me some notes and I'll give you some. Okay? Are they being good? They're better in here than in class. I think we'll just keep them in here. They're like, no. Kids these days, they have it good. They do. I remember growing up in church, my dad would preach every Sunday, and we never had like candy. We never had class. Like these kids would leave and have class, have a bunch of fun, sing songs, you know. We never had that. I remember we'd be sitting wherever, if me or my brother or sister fell asleep, my dad would call us out. Gary! What happened? What's your problem? How's it? We'd laugh, cut up, joke around. My dad would just stop the message. Crazy. You guys got it. My dad took songbooks at us. He had a pile of songbooks, he just started throwing it. Kids are being good. Thank you for being awesome today. So let's get going. Let's get going. How many of you remember the show on television? It was entitled "What Would You Do?" Remember that? It was with John Quinones, and they had actors, and actresses, and they had a video camera crew, and they would create a scenario on the street or in a restaurant, and maybe it was somebody being bullied, maybe it was a lady who, having her purse stolen, and right in front of normal people who had no idea what was going on. And it videotaped them, and then some people obviously wouldn't do anything. Some people, because of maybe his fear, or just didn't want to get involved in the situation, they would do nothing. But there was always somebody who either spoke up or got up and did something about the situation, and then they were interviewed afterward. He would say something like, you saw the situation.